Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 4, Episode 8 of our weekly Q&A&T videos. First off.
Oh yeah, just a quick reminder, we have a Patreon. If you like what we do, feel free to support us. It's the first link in the eye in top right corner, and there'll be a link at the end of the video with our avatar in the bottom right corner.
Yeah, patreon.com/BDCKR2.
Yep.
Anyways, our first question comes from YUCK FASUO, and they say, should I augment health and damage for my best multiplayer character, Injustice 2 Superman or Flashpoint Batman, whom I use for Survivor? They're all fully promoted crit augmented.
Okay, so...
And I'm also assuming max level, probably. That's probably a given.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, no, it's fair to just to lay out all our... what do they call that in logic?
Assumptions?
All our assumptions, and then we figure out where we're going to go from that. So the answer is, like a lot of questions, it depends. It's not a true dichotomy where you're saying this one or that one. The right answer might actually be neither of them. Mm-hmm. So let's break it down. So you've got your best MP guy is Injustice 2 Superman. Your best Survivor guy is Flashpoint Batman, or the one that you like to use the most. So the first question is, who else is on your team for Survivor? Because if Flashpoint Batman is your top stat card, then increasing his health and damage will just mean that you face higher stat opponents in Survivor.
Yeah.
And, I mean, if you needed a demonstration of that, I mean, some people maybe haven't had the experience and they always use golds, but the best demonstration that Survivor scales your stats is when we can start with a bronze team and easily get through the first half dozen fights.
Yeah.
Which shouldn't be possible if it was just the same characters no matter what.
And the only reason we get stopped there, where we don't with golds, is that we have better synergy with our gold teams.
Yeah, they tend to have better passives too. And maybe it doesn't scale perfectly, but it scales enough.
Yeah.
And also when you start a fight with a bronze team, the biggest advantage is when you have that team you lose, you can easily finish that fight with a silver replacement.
Or a gold replacement.
Yeah, but doing silver gives you an extra step.
Yeah.
And then that way you can have a couple of easy fights, and then you can decide if you want to keep on pushing through or not. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not a great strategy if you want to finish the game. Finish Survivor, I mean. Because what you really want to do is just have the best team, but it gives you a couple of freebie fights, and that gets you a little bit further and maybe another last laugh ticket. Now, the glitch for last laugh tickets is patched. Mm-hmm. And if you've got other guys with higher stats, and you're going to be bringing Flashpoint Batman in line with them, then that's actually going to help a little in Survivor. It really depends a little bit on your team. And for multiplayer, the same consideration applies to Injustice 2 Superman. Is he the highest stat guy on your team? And from what you're saying, I'm going to assume it probably is a yes.
Yeah.
So the more unbalanced your team is, the more uselessly lower stat guys are. And in the later fights of the ladder, like the first few fights, again, same thing, almost like for Survivor, it doesn't matter. But in the later fights of a ladder, you're going to be facing even tougher points. You can see this in the fight we're doing now when we do a couple of ultimates. We start off facing teams that are basically the same as ours as far as combined stats. And then when you hit the end, we're facing guys that are maybe up to level 60 Elite 10. Mm-hmm. And, and that's it. If your entire team is already Elite 10, level 60, and you're already facing maxed out guys from the first fight, then you're actually getting advantage out of augmenting health and damage.
Or especially you're fighting like the best guys, like the highest stat guys that you can be.
Right.
Yeah.
So as I've played more, I mean, when I first started playing, I really wanted, like, the collector me wanted to get everybody the maximum elite, whatever it was at the time, whether it was 5 or 7 or 10, or whether the maximum level was 40 or 50 or 60.
Yeah.
I was, my goal was get everybody up, every bronze character, every silver character, everybody up to the max level. And I've been rethinking my strategy a lot. I mean, you can see that in our Flashpoint team, right? Like, they're getting maximum battle points. Would it be more useful to push, now that we're having the Flashpoint Aquaman season, how useful do you think it would be to push them up to, Elite 8 now, and then have to face every team with Astro Harness? That would be a pain for no extra reward. Right now, we are totally overmatching some teams, and the last few fights actually aren't that hard. It really depends on the team makeup and the gear loadout.
Yeah, and also I think there's something to be said for depending on whether you know specifically what role a character is fulfilling in your team.
Right.
If you want them to be basic damage dealer or special specialist, you might consider their attack but not their health.
Right.
Or if you want them to be tank, health but not their attack. But that's only very specifically if you're kind of shoehorning them into that one thing, because the only way to get them a little bit rebalanced again is to bring the other thing back up.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point. I think if there was anything that was going to augment, I'd be augmenting damage every time.
Yeah.
Like every single, even on the tank. Which, I mean, I guess it depends on the tank too, because if you're setting them up properly, then having extra health on them doesn't matter nearly as much.
But I think the problem with that is either way you do it, you're running into, if you add attack and not health, then you're running into a little bit higher risk fights.
Right.
And if you're doing health but not damage, you're running into more drawn out fights.
Yeah, and I'm not a big fan of those.
Yeah, so either way, because the enemies you're fighting are probably going to be a little bit closer to balanced out.
Yep.
And your guys will be a little bit more unbalanced one way or the other, so that is going to change the fights a little bit maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But there we go. And our next question, our final question that we're going to use as a jumping off point to just kind of blather on for a while, the T part of our Q&A&T videos, comes from Injustice Fellow. And they say, also, and then in brackets, unrelated to Injustice, what's your take on Elon Musk and the Falcon heavy launch?
All right, so just as a metaphysical comment, the question is entirely unrelated. The name is right on point, Injustice Fellow. So I think it balances out. It still counts as a...
Username checks out.
Yeah, Injustice Fellow.
Yeah.
All right, so I wanted to ask you a little bit, because we were talking about this almost exactly right before this question showed up.
Yeah, we talked about it a bunch, actually, I think, for maybe like a good solid 20 minutes.
And maybe we can start by giving context to this, because you were reading Soonish.
Yeah, that's a really good book. It's by Zach and Kelly Wiener-Smith. Zach is the creator of Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal, which is one of my favorite kind of like nerd webcomics. It updates pretty much every day, and it's almost always like really funny stuff when I get it.
Right. And what's funny too is it's come up a couple times, because we were recently the two writers who are James S.A. Corey that write The Expanse had specifically mentioned that I should mention Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank. It's not a secret that they're writing together as James S.A. Corey.
Yeah.
Expanse series, I love it. We were at their signing, and during the talk before, they specifically mentioned, they point out Soonish as a great book that they liked and that they'd read and recommended. Yeah.
So one cool thing about Soonish is that they've done a decent amount of research about like what you'd call technologies of the future. So they talk about the kind of realistic barrier to the future technology as we understand it right now. They talk about potential solutions to it, potential ways to get to the future technology, and sometimes like how likely they think it is that that's going to happen. So for space travel, going to space is not the barrier. Going to space cheaply is the barrier, because we can already go to space. We can already send stuff up to space.
Okay, yeah. So this is perfect, right? Because when I was looking online and just reading a little bit about Elon Musk's whole thing is that he was sending a car up, and people were making such a big deal. Wow, he's sending a car up. That's so cool. And it's been done. NASA did it like what 40 years ago.
They sent up a little car and it
More
drove
than 40
around.
Years. Yeah, and it drove around on the moon. So it's funny how our perspective changes, and maybe we can get into a little bit later. Is that one beef I have is that something so great as NASA is being underfunded, and that all these things that they've done, the way they're focusing the story now on this thing that NASA did decades ago, sort of misses the fact that what we're really seeing isn't so much a huge shift in what we can do, but we're watching. To me, it was that we're making the advances that come with any kind of technology we're not so much before as what needs to happen for it to actually reach
mainstream.
Yeah, so there's a penetrance, so that it's. I think William Gibson said it best, was that we are living in the future, but it's unevenly distributed.
Yeah.
And so what we're going to get is more even distribution, where people who don't have to be rich to have access to these like crazy things.
Yeah, so I'm gonna butcher the numbers. If you want more accurate numbers, you can look at Soonish. That's where I'm getting my data from. But they said it's something like, I think it was $10,000 maybe for every kilogram of material that they bring up.
So that's how much it currently costs, or how much
it currently costs.
Okay.
They weren't talking about Musk at all.
All right.
But so That's crazy expensive. And so the reason why we can't do much else except for like the International Space Station and like sending up satellites basically, right, is what we're mostly limited to. The reason why is because it's so prohibitively expensive. So to send a colony to Mars, for example, right, that's one of the things that a lot of people talk about. It would be an insane amount of stuff because you'd have to send up like thousands of pounds of stuff for a big like dome for everybody to live in, or whatever your solution for where everybody lives is crazy expensive. And then whatever your solution is for how many people are going to send up there to make sure that the genetic material is fresh enough that they're not going to have birth defects after a couple generations is also going to be really expensive.
So, quick aside, it's funny because, again, The Expanse deals with this a little bit, where you're talking about the resource-rich planets, and then the people who actually have to work them have a scarcity of resources that they need to be able to survive, and they're reliant on Mars and Earth for giving them the stuff that they need to survive, even though they're really, I guess, I'm trying to think what they're mining the resources from other planets. It has one specific thing that's really valuable, but doesn't have enough balance or diversity to support life.
Yeah. So I think what's really cool about SpaceX and the Heavy is that this is specifically what they're talking about. This is what they're talking about as like a solution to making space travel like reachable in the future, in like the next generation, like actually colonizing the stars. So the issue was that we were at a sticking point where it seemed very difficult to improve efficiency, improve the amount of ballast, because the idea of having to take a huge amount of propellant, and actually the propellant in Soonish I read, it's actually mostly oxygen by weight. Because you need oxygen to actually ignite it. That's one of the...
So you don't have combustion without it.
Yeah, because, well, when we're on Earth, everything burns pretty much everywhere, right? Because we almost always have oxygen. But, like, oxygen specifically is necessary for fire. So when you take it up into space, you can't have a rocket without a crap ton of liquid oxygen in it. And so that's why propellant and fuel are different, because propellant includes oxygen mixed in.
Okay, that's interesting.
So,
it's one of those things where until you do it, you don't really have a sense of how much extra you need to do the stuff that you take for granted when you do it on Earth.
And I'm saying this confidently. I don't want to be held to any of these. I'm sure I'm making mistakes here and there. You could definitely check this out for yourself. If you want a more wholesome view of the actual truth, definitely don't use me as your primary source.
I don't think people are watching our videos for scientific accuracy. But
I know. I know how easy it is to hear something that sounds convincing and then not look at the facts yourself.
Yeah. So but basically what we're saying is we really recommend the book Soonish.
Yeah, we really recommend the book Soonish, and we recommend SMBC. Everything that Zach Weidersmith does, to my knowledge, is very good.
All right. So maybe speaking specifically to Musk doing the work, what I have an issue with, I mean, the idea that he's doing it, that's great. What I have an issue with isn't so much him as the fact that part of what's created this space, this void for him to fill, is the fact that NASA has been underfunded in the last few decades, and there's been less of a push for space travel, and people think, oh well, it's a waste of money, and you know, there's not a lot of value except for the whole race against the Russians to show that they could do it and get to the moon. But I found a few interesting sites that talk about some of the discoveries that were possible because of NASA and discoveries that they made, such as camera phones, scratch-resistant lenses, CAT scans, LEDs. I'd heard of that before. Some of the technology in athletic shoes that were modeled on the technology that was used for spacesuit constructions. Foil blankets, I'd actually heard that before. So that, you know, in our go bags, in our bug out bags, a little thin foil. Oh, that actually, you know what I've seen that technology now. I was at the store. I saw this Columbia shirts that had the foil inside it, so that it was thin and it was able to keep it really warm. Yeah, it's cool. Water purification systems, dust busters, ear thermometers, home insulation, wireless headsets, memory foam. Memory foam is so cool. Freeze dried food. I guess that was a bit more obvious. Hey, remember when you tried that ice cream that was in a package?
Yeah.
So what
which
makes...
is all apparently totally fake. Like, that's not actually
Right,
anywhere.
yeah.
That's nowhere adjacent to astronaut ice cream. That is not at all.
The only way it's adjacent is it's in a foil package.
Yeah.
So what makes me sad is that I mean, it's not like it's the sort of thing that doesn't happen anyways, right? Whenever there's a new technology, it gets optimized and cheaper.
Well, or it dies.
Right. But it's usually in private hands. But I guess what makes me sad is that it's been stagnant for so many years because NASA has been doing stuff. And you can see a little bit of... All right, so the payload cost is way cheaper per weight with Musk.
Yeah, so I was looking it up specifically before the video because I wanted numbers. And what they say is that compared to the nearest comparable rocket, it can deliver twice as much payload for 1/3 the cost, which is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, but there was also trouble, right? They had a failure.
Yeah, so I looked that up too. The central booster rocket did not land where they were expecting it to. So instead of recovering it, it busted.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons why it's supposed to be cheaper is because you don't have to rebuild the thing every time.
Right.
But in that case, whatever the central piece was of the rocket, there was 3 apparently, and so 2 of them landed successfully in the right place, and the 3rd one didn't, which was supposed to be, I think, the main one.
That was a big shift too, right? I mean, originally rockets where you go up, you dump them, the only thing you get back was the module after, right? Attach your parachute. And the shuttle was supposed to be the design where you were bringing a lot of stuff back and you didn't actually have to just dump it.
Yeah, and so that was supposed to make it cheaper. That was one of the things. So that didn't happen, and the actual final destination is wrong. It missed the shot.
So I wonder how much of that cost savings can be that you're not building in as many redundancies, right? Like, I mean, the whole point of the Challenger, when it crashed, I think it was 1986, don't remember exactly, 1987, somewhere around there, is that there was something that, you know, like, that failed that had no backup, and that part of their design was supposed to be that there were supposed to be very few or none of these sort of critical parts that if it failed, everything around it would come down like a house of cards.
Yeah. So who knows? It could be the redundancies. It could be that the weather predictions were inaccurate, or any one of a billion things we don't actually know specifically why. But definitely those are big enough barriers to entry that you would not ever want to send anything important or human or living into space under that condition.
See, all right, so then I guess bring it back to the whole idea of NASA being underfunded. What bugs me a little bit is that potentially then any other kinds of progress or inventions will be potentially owned by somebody private, and we'd have less access to whatever new kinds of discoveries happen as a result of being able to go up cheaper and bring stuff up cheaper and just play around and experiment with stuff. That's true. So that makes me a little sad. No diss on Musk, but it makes me sad that it's come to this where there's going to be a private individual who has so much control over what's happening.
Yeah, I know very, very little about Musk as an actual person. So I don't think we can make any kind of comments on SpaceX as a company or Musk as a person or any of that stuff. It's just, it's an exciting development, I think.
Yeah, but maybe not in exactly the same way that some of the headlines that I saw, at least, were putting it, wow, he's putting a car into space. It's really just, wow, things are getting cheap. I mean, in a lot of ways, like I said, VCRs, for example. I remember when VCRs were $1,000 each.
Yeah.
And, I mean, they're dead. But I remember when, I mean, just recently, LED light bulbs, right?
Yeah.
That they were just so expensive, and now they're, like, everywhere, and they're cheap, and they're cheap enough that you can replace all your compact fluorescent bulbs.
They're cheap enough that people made an expensive version to have a to have OLED, right?
Yeah.
To make it a little bit better so that they could jack up the price again.
Yeah. So that's our kind of take on it. It's really like it's an exciting time where you think that there's a possibility that. All right. So here's the thing. It makes me think of the whole idea of horse manure, and how at one point people thought that was going to be the death of New York City, was because there were so many horse-drawn carriages and horses that the city was getting full of horse poop, and that there would be nowhere to go and nowhere to dump it. So no, but I mean, I hope it's the same sort of thing where we're worried about the environment and climate change and global warming, and that there's a chance that in the next 100 years our world will become unlivable.
Yeah.
And that potentially the solution for it may be something that we don't see, and if it ever gets cheap enough that we can go off into space and colonize the planets around us.
So are wild oats.
Yeah, well, but see, then people didn't realize at the time that automobiles are coming, and they're coming with enough sort of, I don't know what's the word for it. It would be common enough and available enough that it would make horses obsolete, and so the horse manure was no longer the problem where it was piling up.
Now cars have created their own separate problem.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So
hopefully we can just keep delaying what the actual source of issue is.
Yeah, I can't. All right, so I wish I could remember what the name of the book was. It was like something about. I'll put in a link if I can find it after.
For a visual aid, he's looking around. We've got some books along the back wall here. Oh, the headphones are coming off.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the good old days. Oh, hold on.
Okay, the audio might get a little spotty. Oh, there it is.
The Good Old Days, They Were Terrible by Otto L. Bettman. And that's, I don't know how historically accurate it is, but it's one of the stories in it is about how people were afraid that the cities would get overrun by horse poop, and that it was going to be some sort of critical event when it happened, and they couldn't clear it out of the city fast enough. They would be just overrun by horse poop. Or not overrun, but just overwhelmed by horse poop.
Okay.
So is this our last fight? I think this was our last fight. I wasn't entirely paying attention. How many were left?
See, this is why we needed the A&T part. This would never fly in a normal Q&A video.
But I like this. This was like perfect. I love that kind of question because it was actually there was
something that we actually talked about separate from the video. It's not just something that we wanted to talk about. It's something that we wanted to talk about enough that we did in fact talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So let's see if this is the last video. Is the video over? Who will know? Is this last fight?
Somebody who was paying attention better than us. And like I said, too, see, it's the 7th fight. Still only 17 seconds. It's not the best measure of how fast it is. This is the last fight.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
All right, that passed a lot faster than I thought. Thank you very much. That was an interesting conversation.
Yeah, so just to finish up, we've got a Patreon, link in the description. You know the deal if you've watched the video. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next time, and we'll let Alberto take it away.
Alberto Jr. Camarillo, here to address the masses. Komodo.